Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. We are fueled by Gatorade on this Tuesday. Truly great to have you with us, and truly great to have Andy Katz alongside in town here in Chicago for a few days for the NBA Draft Combine, which is littered with Big Ten talent.
Yeah, throughout the course of the season, we knew there was immense talent, especially in that freshman class. We have a chance to see three different schools have two first-round picks, and one school could have two in the top five.
Yeah, and that school, of course, is Rutgers, as they have both Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey looking like top of the draft picks as we look at our big story, and it is the Big Ten and that NBA draft projected to have somewhere in the neighborhood of a half dozen in the first round. As Andy said, that Rutgers duo, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, who both played 1 year for the Scarlet Knights, seen as the top two. Maryland's Derek Queen saw his stock skyrocket after a year in College Park. Illinois' Kasparas Yakachonis seen as a top half of the first-round talent as well at point guard. In all, there are 12 players in Chicago this week who played in the Big Ten last season. It's a list that also includes Michigan's two big men, Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, Will Riley joining Yakachonis from Illinois, Jace Richardson, John Tonje, Bryce Williams, also on the original invite list, and then Penn State's Yannick Conan-Niederhauser and former Hoosier Mackenzie Mbako were late adds. The draft lottery last night, Dallas the unlikely winner of that, so the consensus is that the Mavericks would go with Cooper Flagg, who most people feel is the best player available in this draft. And then after that, it's where it gets interesting for the Big Ten, with Harper perhaps being chosen as high as number 2, Andy.
Yeah, I think, first of all, there was a point, if you remember, earlier in the season when the question was, could Harper pass Flagg for the number 1 pick? Harper gets hurt, Flagg continues to skyrocket. But the consensus seems to be that Dylan Harper is the second best player. Now, whether or not he goes number 2, that's the question. As you see, the Spurs got the second pick. They've got Stephon Castle from UConn, who had a phenomenal rookie season. The Sixers are 3. Jared McCain, former Duke player, he's their top guard, if you will. I mean, obviously they have Tyrese Maxey, but I mean, in terms of a younger guard, where does Harper fit in? Well, he could fit in either. He's a true point. And those two franchises then would have assets. And I would be shocked if he doesn't go 2, and then the team just has to figure out. You know, we don't know if these teams are going to try to work a Giannis trade,
right,
and you need assets. So more often than not, teams take the best player rather than fit. Is VJ Edgecombe from Baylor better fit? We shall see. But I think Dylan Harper, I really believe he will be the second player chosen. Whether the Spurs keep that pick or not, I think he will be number 2 on the draft board.
So it gets interesting with his teammate Bailey. First of all, he measured shorter than he was listed by a significant margin yesterday. He measured at 6'7". He's listed at 6'10". He's still got the 7-foot wingspan, so he plays big rather than, as a smaller player. Still, that 3-inch discrepancy, I think, is interesting. And then there's just some question sometimes about his motor, about is he at that level? Is he worth a number 3 pick? Philadelphia's in an interesting spot if they end up as the team. What do you think about Bailey? Have we seen his stock go down, or is he still pretty well cemented in that 3rd spot?
I think he is. I mean, the one player that could nudge him out is VJ Edgecombe from Baylor. But I don't think it matters as much on the reduced side, if you will, than what Rutgers put out because he plays big, because of his wingspan, because he's a shot blocker, rim protector, and can defend really pretty much all positions for the most part. He can play out on the perimeter. His mid-range game, I mean, he was telling me yesterday when I talked to him, he loves that mid-range game, getting into the zone, in the college game and hitting that.
But those aren't shots the NBA loves,
correct,
right? Yeah.
Correct. But, he views himself as having a versatile game. Where my concern, and I actually saw a personnel director this morning walking along Lake Michigan, was with Jace Richardson's height. I think when you have a combo guard who measures only at 6 feet, so he's not a true point and he's not only a shooter, that's where I think there's some concern. And I'll be interested to see how Jace Richardson's draft process, continues over the next couple of weeks, because that's a little bit of a knock on him that he measured shorter.
Derek Queen, we saw his stock just elevate during the course of the year. He's a 5-star player, and everyone knew he was going to be really good. But to me, he showed off the versatility, the ability to handle the ball. He can play the 4. He's big enough and physical enough to play inside in the 5. Feels like a really good piece. And I know there's some talk, DMV kid, that maybe he'd end up going to the Wizards.
Yeah, no, I think his stock is skyrocketing. And in talking to him yesterday, we talked about the play, which really, sort of epitomized his season and his skill set. And I'm talking about the game winner to beat Colorado State. Because here's a big guy. First of all, leadership. In the huddle, in the timeout, he calls for the ball.
Right.
Give me the ball. That's a freshman saying, I'm going to win this game. That's number 1. 2, so there's confidence. He puts the ball on the floor. I mean, he's a big guy who can play like a guard, as you see here, and he puts the ball on the floor to get by his defender, and then he's got a great touch. That was not an easy shot.
Right.
Floats it up there, gets it in, and so all those aspects of his game, obviously he's a pretty good defender, moves his feet really well. Here's a great story he told me. I said, how you're so limber and a big guy. He says, I grew up in a house where we had wooden stairs. And he said, I didn't want to wake up my mother when I go down in the morning. It's true story. He tells me, he says,
crazy.
So he knew where the spots that made noise on the stairs were. So he says he was sort of tiptoeing down, and he thinks that helped him be more agile as he grew, that he was able to sort of dance along down the steps.
So I'd stick with I was tiptoeing down early in the morning rather than I was tiptoeing up late at night.
Yes, yes.
I like that version of the
Yes.
story better. Hey, what about Kasparas Giacochonis? He got off to the great start. I mean, his positional size is unbelievable. He's got incredible vision. He's a really good passer. It feels like he could be a combo guard, right? He could play off the ball as well, and we saw that at times. But it did feel like his game fluctuated a little bit during the course of the year. Like, where do you see him? Is he still a top half talent? Are there questions about him, or do people feel pretty confident?
Well, you know how the NBA is enamored by Euros.
Right.
And yes, he played the 1 year at Illinois, but he played in Spain at a high level. We're in this era where you can do that. It used to be you couldn't do that. He goes from Lithuania to Spain as a 15-year-old, plays professionally, plays at Illinois. I'll tell you one thing I just noticed yesterday. He's gotten bigger. Mm-hmm. Like, I wouldn't say he was skinny when he got to Illinois, but he physically looks like he's been hitting the weight room. And so I think his strength, be able to take contact and finish, will help him in these workouts. And I heard nothing but positive things about Giacochonis yesterday.
You mentioned some schools have a chance to have 2 players picked in the first round. Illinois is one of them if Will Riley were a first-round pick. I think Michigan's really interesting. I just wanted to ask you about those 2 guys. Like, how does the NBA see Danny Wolf, who, we saw flashes of jaw-dropping ability from him this year. There are, I think, still some questions about some of the decision-making. And also Vlad Golden and where he fits in. What's the viewpoint of those 2 players?
Well, so I talked to Wolf yesterday, and he said that the turnovers, maybe it's an excuse or not, but he says a lot of it came from playing, a position that he wasn't used to. He used to just be the 5 at Yale, and now he's, the sort of the 4-5 with Golden. And there was, yes, some decision-making, but it was sort of adjusting to learning how to play that position. He, first of all, could not stop praising that Michigan staff and how they helped him get to this position,
right,
which is a great sort of promotion for Dusty May and their staff. Because he said when he got to Yale, he barely played. Then he started to play more, and obviously helped Yale beat Auburn in that first round. And then he gets to Michigan, gets stronger, didn't know that he was going to be playing with Golden, didn't know how it would work out. It worked out, obviously, to where they were one of the better teams in the Big Ten. They win the Big Ten tournament. So his basketball IQ, his skill set is going to help him. I expect him to be somewhere in that 12 to 20 range. And then Golden, he is who he is. He's a finished product, strong, can score in the post. And the chatter is that he's either late first or early second. So, I think both bigs will be taken, in pretty good spots.
Saw him add a 3-point shot to his game this year as well. Speaking of bigs, just really quickly, I thought the Conan Niederhauser story was interesting this week where he got added to the combine. Are we seeing a guy who might end up being a high riser and get picked here?
Yeah, so Conan Niederhauser and Mbaka were part of that G League camp on the weekend, and they always take a couple of those guys to the regular combine, and that's a great sign. No question about it. Again, he was another player who got hurt late, and we didn't see his full potential this season at Penn State, but certainly as a rebounder, a rim runner. There's no question. I think he could find himself somewhere, on that board.
It's crazy, some of these stories, right? I mean, guys, like he was not a great player.
Yes.
Northern Illinois ends up, now he's at the combine a year later. You talk about Danny Wolf, 2 years removed from playing 7 minutes a game. John Tonje is another one, right? He was an off-the-radar transfer portal player, and now he's at the combine. I mean, it shows you what one great year can do for you.
And one other quick thing, just to say Will Riley. Will Riley had an interesting year where great early, then he kind of dipped a little, if you remember during the season, and then had a nice strong finish that has given him some momentum.
So pretty exciting year for the Big Ten. It'll be fascinating to see.
They will be littered in the first round.
Where all these guys end up. Lots more from Andy coming up. We will switch gears a little bit. We'll take a deep dive into the Big Ten transfer portal winners, which teams have done the best job to set themselves up for next season. Our Gatorade game leaders focusing on the 7 Big Ten women's golf teams that advanced out of regionals into the 30-team NCAA championship, which is this coming week in Carlsbad, California. Big Ten sent 8 teams to the regionals, all but one of them advancing to this cut-down field. A quick reminder on how this works. Those 30 teams that are heading to Carlsbad will play 54 holes of stroke play, after which the field is whittled down to 15 teams for one more day of stroke play, and then the top 8 are placed into a match play bracket. The team matches consist of 5 individual head-to-head matches, with a team needing 3 match wins to advance to the next round. Big Ten Network analyst Emma Carpenter joining us now to break down, first off, what's going on with the women. Emma, let's talk about the Big Ten champ, Oregon, because they are really cooking. They played really well in the Big Ten championship, and they have continued to do it. Just ran away from the field, and Oregon, Chiara Romero's been fantastic.
You are absolutely right about that, Dave. An unbelievable performance by Oregon yet again. Took care of business at the Big Ten championship and then turned around and took care of business again at the Gold Canyon Regional. After winning Big Tens, they won by 9 at the Gold Canyon Regional, and Chiara Romero with the individual win as well. She is on fire. She had 4 runner-up finishes this season going into Big Tens, and she wins Big Tens and backs it up with the regional win by 7 shots. I think you can call that some momentum for this team heading into the championships, would you say?
I would say so. No, they are really playing well. A team that won the Big Ten by 14 strokes. You finished 16 under in your regional. Really impressive from Romero. How about Purdue, the only team in the old Big Ten ever to win a national championship? Obviously, of the new teams, 3 of the 4 have actually won a national championship in women's golf. But man, Purdue went right down to the wire in its regional, pulling off a dramatic finish to win a playoff and advance to this group of 30. Fill people in on how they did it.
Well, gosh, you have got to hand it to Purdue. And I tell you what, Dave, I got to circle back to what I said in the Big Ten Women's Championship preview. I called Purdue my dark horse. And this is exactly why this is what this team is capable of. Now, they did not have the most solid finish. They had an 11th place finish at Big Tens. But at the Lubbock Regional, it was a 5-on-5 playoff, 1 hole. All 5 scores count. So every single player of this team is contributing. And it was Natasha Keel with the eagle on the playoff hole. How about this? 225-yard 3-iron and then rolls in the eagle putt in front of the gallery to punch their ticket to the national championships. It's just really impressive, and clutch would be an understatement.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing considering you had 2 opponents. They were standing over birdie putts, and you roll home the eagle. That can be a little bit deflating. And again, it moves Purdue on in incredibly dramatic fashion. What about Northwestern and Michigan State? They were in the same regional. They finished 2nd and 3rd, respectively, but there were 13 strokes between them. Really a big gap between Stanford, Northwestern, and everyone else in that regional. And it kind of highlights how important depth is this time of year.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned depth, because heading into the national championships, when you have so many rounds of stroke play, and then you move to match play. The format is huge. There was a 9-shot difference in the Norman Regional between first and second place, 13-shot difference between second and third, and that shows just how quickly things can change in team golf and just how quickly the cream can rise to the top. I mean, Stanford, that win that they had is unbelievable. They're going to be the team to watch, but with this NCAA format, stroke play moving into match play, you need good golf from players 1 through 5, and it is the team that has the kind of depth that any player on the roster can go out on any given day and win a golf tournament. Now, we talked a lot about how in team golf, when you only have 5 players on the golf course, having a superstar is going to make a huge difference. But in match play, if you have 5 superstars, you're going to be hard to beat.
Let's focus on UCLA. They were the national runner-up a year ago and haven't necessarily had a great year here. Emma, been a little tougher sledding. But, man, you managed to get through, and I think if you look at it from UCLA's perspective, you're in that group of 30. You got a chance to win the national championship. Anyone who's in there has a chance. But fill us in on the Bruins and why maybe things haven't gone as smoothly as they did a year ago.
Yeah, the Bruins they've been a powerhouse golf school for a very, very long time, and they were narrowly possibly going to make that. There was a new rule that was put in place this year, Dave. It's the 500 rule. So that means that you needed to have the majority of your finishes be wins. So you needed to have more wins than losses over the course of the entire season. And you're playing, up to 16 teams at one time. So you need to be finishing in the top half of the field on average. And UCLA was very close to this going into the Big Ten championship. You needed to have that 500 rule finish in order to make it to postseason, and they finished 7th place at Big Ten, so that narrowly kept them above that new rule, made it to regionals, and then they again finished in 5th place. Only the top 5 teams from each regional are advancing. They finished in that 5th place spot by 7 strokes, so a bit of a decent cushion, but again, when that's 4 scores counting, 7 strokes really isn't all of that much. So you're right, though. 30 teams heading into the national championship, any single one of those teams has a shot, and I guarantee you that is the mindset that they are going to have, that they have just as much of a shot to be national champions as any other team.
And in fairness, that regional was loaded. They had 4 ranked teams ahead of them, so finishing 5th
Right.
is still pretty impressive. What about the men? It's going on right now, the regionals, so it's kind of a little bit of a moving target, but big picture here, it's the same format. You'll end up with 30 teams making it through. They're also going to play for that national championship in Carlsbad, California. Who can follow suit and maybe be the team that emerges as the biggest threat out of the Big Ten to be a national champion this year?
That's a great question. I think all eyes are going to be on Illinois after what happened at the Big Ten Championship just a couple of weeks ago. It was a heartbreaking loss for Illinois, but a real exciting win for UCLA. UCLA was ranked just 1 spot above Illinois. UCLA is currently at 12, Illinois at 13. But right now, Illinois is dominating at the Urbana Regional where they're hosting. Jackson Buchanan finished in 42nd place at the Big Ten Championship when all eyes were really on Jackson Buchanan to win individually at the Big Ten Championship. Buchanan was Big Ten Golfer of the Year last year. He's a senior. He's a leader. So wasn't the finish that Buchanan was looking for, wasn't the finish that U of I was looking for. Mike Small says that his team, he builds teams to win championships, and they just finished 1 shot behind UCLA that final round. And but Jackson Buchanan, Urbana Regional, 8 under par, bogey-free, 63 in round 1. Illinois absolutely dominating. Now, there's still lots to come, but I think lots of eyes are going to be on UCLA and Illinois heading into the national championship.
As you say, nice play on your home course in the regional. We saw Ohio State's women do that as well, and they advanced to the field of 30 on the women's side as well. Emma Carpenter, great stuff. I know you're headed to the PGA Championship this weekend. There are a lot of jealous people out there. Enjoy yourself in Charlotte. Thanks for giving us a little bit of your time.
Thank you so much, Dave. A lot to keep our eyes on. Big Ten teams are representing well, so excited to see that momentum keep on going into the NCAA championships. Thanks for having me today.
Back to basketball in the top transfer portal classes, according to 247 Sports. Michigan topping the Big Ten, second in the nation. USC, Iowa, Indiana also in the top 10. In all, 7 of the top 15 classes are Big Ten schools. You see Illinois at 43rd, little deceptive there, given that the Illini cleaned up with international players who do not show up in the portal rankings. Andy is back here, and let's break down some of these classes. And you start with Michigan, and Yaxel Lendenberg is the big question here. He's a transfer from UAB. He is going to Michigan if he stays in college, but he also got invited to the Combine. I know you got a chance to visit with him yesterday. Michigan fans on pins and needles here. What did you learn?
Yeah, and so is Dusty May and his staff. And Yaxel told me, he said he's 60-40. I said, okay, who's got the 60? He said Michigan. And I said, so if you go to Michigan, what do you hope will happen? He says, Big Ten Player of the Year, win the Big Ten, get to the Final Four, compete for a national championship. So he's talking big goals. And I will tell you, if he decides to go to Michigan, we're going to be talking a lot about him on this show, on these sets. He is a stat stuffer, loves to defend and rebound, but he can put the ball in the basket. There's no question that if he returns to college basketball but goes to Michigan, he will be in the conversation for Big Ten Player of the Year, first team All Big Ten. He is that significant potentially to the Wolverines.
And he's not the only guy in that class. I mean, it's a really good class. Adai Mara from UCLA is headed to Michigan. Morez Johnson, so you got a couple of transfers within the conference. And then Elliot Cadell, good guard from North Carolina. So regardless of whether they have Lendenberg, they got a really good class. But the difference of having him, it sounds like you're saying, is monumental.
Monumental. But and the other thing, what I love about what Dusty May's done is we know he's got the blueprint for bigs that can complement each other.
Right.
Obviously with Wolf and Golden. Now, just put Landenberg on the side here for a minute. How do they use Mara and Johnson? Mara, obviously, when he played for UCLA, that was always the big question. When he played, because he didn't always play.
Yeah.
He was a difference maker. Remember, his sort of coming out party was that game against Wisconsin in LA. And, I mean, shot blocker, and you can't get around him. And then you get Morez Johnson, who's much more of a physical presence. Right off the bat, I mean, Michigan's going to have 2 of the better bigs. Now you throw Landenberg in there, and that's a pretty formidable front line, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country.
I want to ask you a little bit about USC. They've got a really good class. Now, the door revolves both ways, as we know, in the transfer portal. You lose Desmond Claude, who's a really good player. Wesley Yates is headed back to Washington. But this is a very good class that USC got, and one that I know you believe will have them solidly in NCAA tourney contention.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy because they lost Yates to Washington. By the way, former Washington player, USC assistant Quincy Pondexter,
yes,
also
now
just went to Washington.
Yes.
So there's a little,
right.
trading going back and forth. So Washington poaches Yates. And then USC takes advantage of the coaching change at Maryland and gets Rodney Rice, who had a phenomenal season last season for Maryland in the Big Ten. And then, a bit of a surprise, I mean, I didn't sort of see this on the radar, Chad Baker-Mazara, who I covered in the Maui Invitational and then in the NCAA tournament, was a great player for Auburn this past season. One of the main reasons that Auburn got to the Final Four with Janai Broome. So you add him with Rice, and suddenly USC's got the experience of players who competed at the highest level for potential national championship to get to a Final Four in the case of Chad Baker-Mazara. So I really like what USC. And look, we hope that Arenas comes back healthy.
Yeah, 5-star player was in the car accident.
Yeah, Gilbert Arenas' son. Hopefully he comes back, and if he does, he's one of the best high school seniors in the country.
It's funny, you think about USC a year ago, and you had a coaching change, and you basically had a program starting a roster from scratch, and that's what Indiana is this year. I mean, essentially nothing back from a year ago. You have a brand new coach, Darren DeVries, a brand new staff as well. They did really well in the portal. Obviously, his son is kind of front and center that, coming over from West Virginia. But what do you make of the group that Indiana has assembled, which is ranked pretty highly here?
Yeah, again, I think it's a TBD. I think, first of all, we got to make sure Tucker DeVries is healthy because he did not finish the season at West Virginia. But if he is, then there's no question that right off the bat, Indiana's got, an all Big Ten type player. He was the best player in the Valley for Drake when his dad was coaching there. Got off to a pretty good start at the beginning. But I feel like they've got other good pieces in terms of shooters, some bigs. The big question, of course, will be, can it all fit? And we just don't know.
I like what they did. I mean, DeVries is a superstar, and if he plays at the potential of what he's been earlier in his college career, to your point, if he's 100% healed, he's maybe an all-league kind of caliber player. But what I like is the rest of the guys. I mean, obviously last year they made huge splashes in the portal, and to your point, it didn't necessarily fit together. I mean, there was so much excitement around Umar Ballo coming, was considered the #1 player. Number of other guys where it felt like kind of individually these were good pieces, but for whatever reason it didn't mesh. And I think this is a group of guys who were really productive players, might not have quite the star power outside of one or two of them, but I think it's all going to be about how DeVries fits them together.
Yeah, and he's done a good job of that, obviously. They should have been in the NCAA tournament at West Virginia. I mean, I had them in. I think I was not alone. They were the team that sort of...
There were some politicians who agreed with you.
Yes. Lawsuits that never went anywhere. So, I mean, I thought he did a solid job despite the injuries in Morgantown. Comes back to the Midwest. And, again, we don't know how this is going to fit. No one knew that Michigan's transfer portal pieces were going to fit the way they did. So we have to wait and see. I know you're going to mention Iowa. It worked for Ben McCollum at Drake to bring everyone from Northwest Missouri State D2, including Bennett Sturts, who ends up being the Valley Player of the Year at Drake. Now he's taken some of those same pieces to Iowa.
Right.
Will it work the same? Will Sturts be able to now go from, D2 to the Valley to the Big Ten? We're going to have to wait and see.
I just think it's hard when you have very little continuity, and it's hard to have continuity when you have coaching changes, kind of what you're talking about with McCollum at Iowa, I think is an interesting example. What I have found interesting in terms of maybe a slightly changed approach is Illinois, because Illinois essentially had nothing back last year, and they tried to rebuild the roster from scratch. They had a lot of guys leaving the portal. This year it's a little bit different now. You're going to have some holdovers in this class. They did very well in the portal. It's even better, though, if you consider the international players and this kind of Balkan influence that Brad Underwood has brought to Champaign. But Peja Stojakovic's son, a really productive player in college basketball. I mean, there's a lot of good pieces here when you consider the holdovers, the portal guys, and the internationals he's bringing in.
Yeah, he's got the brothers Ivicevic coming over now.
Yeah.
It was Kentucky, Arkansas, now joining his brother at Illinois. I love Stojakovic. Had a great year at Cal playing for Mark Madsen. So I think he'll be a huge addition. Look, Brad Underwood made it pretty clear that he wanted to go with experienced players. I'm not saying he's not going to recruit high school seniors. Obviously he has. But he wants to recruit experienced players. He had success, obviously, with Yakachonis. Will Riley from Canada, but at the same, I'm not dismissing that it's not international, but it's a little different than going Europe. They've embraced it. I love the memes, Instagram, where he's squatting in front of with the derby on in front of the Soviet Eastern Bloc buildings that all look the same.
Yes.
So the Balkanization of Champaign, because I feel like when you go to Champaign, do you feel like you're in Estonia?
I do not feel like I'm in Estonia, no. It's my birthplace you're talking about.
I'm kidding. But it's going to be, will the fans, I think they'll embrace it.
If they win, yeah.
Yes.
But I like the notion that you have some continuity here. You have guys who played from last year, so I think it fits together really nicely. man, I mean, I know the Illinois fans in my circle are pretty fired up about
But
this
I think
team next
also
year.
it's going to be a very skilled team.
Right.
And, a team that can score. And so, that's what Underwood wants to do.
Yeah. Other portal classes that really jump out at you? You mentioned Iowa with Sturts and the changes they're making there. Who else do you think?
Well, I think I can cherry pick and say that one of the best players in the portal was Donovan Dent. New Mexico, Mountain West Conference Player of the Year, led the Lobos under then head coach Richard Pitino, ended up losing to Michigan State, a couple rounds in the NCAA tournament. I love him. I think he's going to have an
UCLA for him.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, now going to UCLA. He's from Southern California, so was not recruited by UCLA initially. Clearly earned that right to now play there. I think he's going to have a major impact. I think he's a potential All Big Ten player. So you get him. On the other side, kind of odd that they took Booker. I mean, there's been so much potential for Xavier Booker at Michigan State. It didn't ever reach its potential with Tom Izzo. And I wonder, okay, does that mean, because, Mick Cronin, obviously, he's an intense guy like Izzo. Is Booker going to respond more to Cronin than he would to Izzo? I don't know. That was the one that was a little head-scratching to me.
Right. I mean, sometimes it's just a change of scenery for a guy, and we'll see. And I think, Tom's had a couple public statements where he's essentially said, I just feel like for whatever reason I wasn't able to get through to him, and kind of putting it on himself a little bit more so than putting it on the player, which, that's Tom, and again, I really respect that. But maybe it is. Maybe it's just, hey, I wasn't the right guy for him, and maybe Mick will be.
And real quick, we mentioned Washington getting Yates. Also got
They have a great class.
Yes, Lathan Somerville from Rutgers.
Right.
So it's, Big Ten poaching across the country. Somerville, I thought, had moments last season where he could be a significant contributor, and they needed more help inside. And then, it's a TBD on Maryland. I don't think they're done. But getting Pharrell Payne, who we should all remember from Minnesota, helped Buzz Williams at A&M, and now is at Maryland. So he's hop, skipped, and jumped there, and he's going to be back in the mix. Yeah,
it's funny when you mention like Somerville. I mean, I think back in the day that used to, or Xavier Booker, any of these guys are transferring the conference. Like it's not. We're not that far removed from just thinking that was the strangest thing.
Right. Was Spike Albrecht was one of the few? Didn't he go?
Yes, he went Michigan to Purdue.
Right.
At the end.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. But yes, I mean it's just now. It's just this is what happens.
Yes.
Right. You don't even bat an eye about it. Andy releasing his Power 37 yesterday on social media. There is a Big Ten team on top, Purdue, checking in as his #1 team heading into next year. Michigan also in the top 10. Oregon, UCLA, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan State also showing up in the top 25. You are not alone in your love of Purdue, Andy. Some pretty good job with retention, including Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn at Fletcher Lawyer as well, and then some portal ads as well.
Yeah, I mean, so first off, tell me another team that retained a Player of the Year and a guy that really, another first-team all-conference at that level. I mean, Purdue continues to have an unbelievable job, do an unbelievable job of retention, pre-NIL and post-NIL. There's something in the water in West Lafayette. They do a great job in culture of players wanting to be there. There's a lot of rumors in the latter part of the season that people were going to try to come in and poach Braden Smith. Didn't happen. I mean, Braden Smith, I would anticipate, could have his jersey in the rafters.
For sure.
And, with him coming back, Trey Kaufman-Renn is going to be an even better player, you would project. Fletcher Lawyer, if he can be a little more consistent. You said they did a good job. Yes, they lost Heidi and Colvin. We kind of expected that. But then Daniel Jacobson's going to come back.
Yes.
He got hurt right at the beginning of the season. He was highly touted big. Look what's there.
And they got
Purdue
Clough.
should be the #1 team in the country.
They got Clough in the portal as well. But Jacobson's interesting because Matt Painter was telling me that was the guy they thought was going to be their rim protector. And if you look at what the liability was last year, it was interior defense. They were among the worst in the country. Now you got a 7'4" guy coming in, which will help you. Maybe 7'2". I don't know. He's very tall.
And remember, they were one play away from knocking out Houston.
Right.
And then who knows?
Michigan. You had them in the top 10. I assume that is with Lindbergh?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we have to deal with what we know right now, which is he says he's going to Michigan. He's in the draft.
Right.
But with him, as we said before, unbelievable front line with Daimara and Mo Johnson, Morez Johnson going in there. I mean, just it'll be a phenomenal in Purdue if he can play up to his potential. I think Michigan could be right there.
Oregon is bringing a lot back. Jackson Shellstad, Nate Biddle. I know Nate Biddle is at least getting feedback.
He was at the G League Combine this past weekend, didn't advance. But again, retention. If, as expected, it's Biddle and Shellstad, that's 2 all Big Ten players. I mean, I think the Ducks are going to be right there in that top 4 in the Big Ten.
Team that lost to Arizona in the second round of the NCAAs last year. UCLA, you mentioned Donovan Dent from New Mexico, a really good portal class, and he is the headliner.
And Tyler Bilodeau. I mean, he's projected to come back, so if all that stays true, they've got a potential all Big Ten player that Donovan Dent can feed. And so I think the Bruins are going to be right in that mix as well.
Illinois, you're not as high on them.
I'm rolling some dice here.
I would go the other way, man. I think they're going to be great.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they will be.
Right.
But we don't know. We don't know.
Okay. So what are your hesitations with them?
Well, just do all the pieces fit? I mean, you're taking guys from all over the place. It's not a completely new roster, but there's a lot of new faces.
Who stands out from that next group that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I mean, I'd say USC. I mean, I really like what the Bruins did. Obviously,
the Trojans did.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be, rising up.
Okay.
I think, Indiana, it's TBD. I think Wisconsin, Blackwell coming back with Winter. They're going to be right in the mix as well. Maryland, we'll see what Buzz puts together finally with the complete roster. I think and then Ohio State. Keep an eye on the Buckeyes with Bruce Thornton returning.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to like. Michigan State, where are you?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we didn't mention them.
Where are you with them?
If they can get the kind of big men play they had this past season by committee, I think they'll be right in the mix because their guards are back for the most part. I know they lost Holloman, but they'll be back.
Jackson Kohler coming back, Carr, so there's a lot to like there. Well, this was fun.
Yes, thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the Combine. We'll see you next time on Big Ten Today.